Welcome to Horrific Stories. Today's tale is a terrifying journey filled with suspense and chilling twists. If you love horror, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling tales. There's something eerie about old movie theaters. Their grand facades, once vibrant and full of life, now seem to loom over the streets with an air of forgotten memories. This was especially true for the Majestic, a theater built in the 1920s that had been closed for decades. Located in the heart of a quiet Midwestern town, it was a relic of a bygone era. Locals whispered about the tragic fire that destroyed part of the theater in the 1950s, claiming several lives. Since then, it had been abandoned, its once gilded walls now covered in dust and decay. But in 2023, the Majestic was set to reopen. An independent film company bought the property and restored it, promising to keep its original charm intact. They planned a grand reopening weekend, screening classic horror films in homage to its dark history. The highlight was to be a midnight screening of a lost film that was reportedly found in the theater's basement during renovations. The film was titled The Last Reel, and no one had ever heard of it. Rumors swirled that it was an unfinished movie from the 1950s, directed by a filmmaker who had perished in the fire. That added to the allure. Tickets for the midnight show sold out within hours, despite some locals warning, "There's a reason certain things stay buried." The night of the screening. The night of the screening, a mix of excitement and unease filled the air. The theater's interior was breathtaking. The restoration had brought back its red velvet curtains, ornate gold trimmings, and chandeliers that sparkled like stars. The seats were packed with horror enthusiasts, urban explorers, and curious townsfolk. As the lights dimmed and the projector began to whir, the audience quieted. The opening credits of The Last Reel appeared, accompanied by an ominous score that seemed to hum right into the bones of those watching. The film began with grainy black and white footage of an empty movie theater, a theater that looked eerily similar to the Majestic. The story was simple, yet unsettling. A group of moviegoers became trapped in a theater as strange occurrences unfolded. At first, it was minor, shadowy figures appearing in the background of scenes, whispers that seemed to bleed through the audio. But as the film progressed, the events grew darker. The characters in the movie began to panic as the screen came alive with grotesque imagery. Faces melting, bodies being pulled into the walls, and shadowy figures stalking them. About halfway through the film, something bizarre happened. The projector flickered, and the screen went black. The audience groaned, assuming it was a technical glitch. But before the theater staff could intervene, the screen lit up again, this time showing a live feed of the audience themselves, sitting in the Majestic. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Some laughed nervously, assuming it was a clever gimmick. But then, the camera panned across the theater, revealing something that wasn't supposed to be there. Standing in the back row, barely visible in the shadows, was a tall figure wearing a charred suit. Its face was obscured, but its glowing eyes pierced through the darkness. The nightmare begins. At first, people thought it was part of the show, a practical effect designed to spook them. But then, the figure began to move. It stepped out of the shadows and into the aisle, its charred footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. Screams erupted as the figure began to descend the aisle, turning its head slowly toward individuals as if it were choosing its next victim. Suddenly, the lights in the theater went out entirely, plunging everyone into darkness. Panic set in. People fumbled for their phones, but no one could get a signal. The emergency exits wouldn't budge. The air grew thick with the smell of smoke and burnt flesh, and some swore they heard faint cries for help, the cries of those who had perished in the fire decades ago. When the lights flickered back on, the figure was gone. But the screen now displayed a close-up of one of the audience members, a young woman sitting in the middle row, her face frozen in terror. She screamed as something unseen yanked her backward into the darkness. Her seat was empty when the lights flickered again. Chaos erupted. People pushed and shoved, desperate to escape. But every time the lights went out, another person vanished, and their image would appear on the screen, trapped in the grainy black and white footage of the last reel. The escape. A group of 5 friends sitting together decided to make a run for the projection room, believing it might hold the key to stopping the madness. They navigated the labyrinth of corridors backstage, hearing whispers and footsteps all around them. When they reached the projection room, they found the projector running on its own. The film reels spun impossibly fast, and the charred figure stood beside it, watching the screen. It turned to face them, its head tilting unnaturally. One of the friends, a film student, noticed an old film canister labeled "Do Not Screen." Desperate, they grabbed it and hurled it at the projector. The impact caused the projector to explode in a shower of sparks, and the figure let out an inhuman wail before vanishing into the smoke. The aftermath. The survivors stumbled out of the theater, coughing and covered in soot. They looked back to see the Majestic engulfed in flames once more, as if the past was reclaiming it. Firefighters arrived quickly, but by the time the fire was extinguished, the theater was reduced to ashes. Authorities found no trace of the missing audience members or the mysterious film reels. The survivors tried to explain what had happened, but their story was dismissed as hysteria. The town quietly declared the land cursed, and the Majestic was never rebuilt. Years later, a video surfaced online. Grainy footage of the midnight screening, showing the audience laughing and chatting before the film began. At the very end of the clip, the camera panned to the back of the theater, where a charred figure stood watching. And then, the video cut to black. The viral video of the Majestic screening brought renewed attention to the town. Paranormal enthusiasts, thrill seekers, and conspiracy theorists flocked to the ashes of the theater, eager to uncover the truth behind the haunting. While most dismissed the video as a clever hoax, the survivors knew better. Among them was Sarah, one of the 5 friends who had escaped that night. The trauma of the experience lingered, and her once joyful demeanor had been replaced by a perpetual unease. She avoided mirrors, refused to attend movie screenings, and rarely left her house. But the nightmares persisted. In her dreams, she was back in the Majestic, sitting in the audience as the last reel played. One by one, the people around her disappeared, pulled into the screen by shadowy hands. And always, at the edge of her vision, she saw the charred figure watching her. One night, Sarah awoke to find her television flickering on its own. Static filled the screen, accompanied by faint whispers. She reached for the remote to turn it off, but the image changed before she could press the button. It was her living room, displayed as if filmed from a hidden camera. Her breath hitched as the screen panned to the hallway behind her. Standing there, bathed in darkness, was the figure. Its glowing eyes pierced the screen before the television abruptly shut off. The investigation. Desperate for answers, Sarah reached out to the other survivors. 2 of them, Jason and Olivia, agreed to meet. The others, still too shaken or unwilling to discuss the events, refused. Jason had spent the months since the fire researching the Majestic and the mysterious last reel. His findings were chilling. The fire in 1953 wasn't an accident, he explained, spreading old newspaper clippings across the table. It started during the premiere of a film, one directed by Edwin Hargrave. Sarah frowned. The name sounded familiar. He was obsessed with creating the perfect horror movie, Jason continued. But his methods were unethical. He'd hire desperate actors, make them sign vague contracts, and then put them through horrific scenarios on set. People went missing, and rumors spread that his films weren't just staged. He was filming real suffering. "That's sick," Olivia whispered. Jason nodded grimly. The night of the fire, the last reel, was supposed to premiere. Witnesses claimed Hargrave locked the doors and declared that the audience would be part of his masterpiece. But before the film could finish, the fire broke out, killing dozens, including Hargrave. "And the film?" Sarah asked. Jason's expression darkened. "Never found until now." The curse of the film. The trio decided to return to the site of the Majestic. The lot was abandoned, cordoned off with flimsy barriers and signs warning trespassers. But Sarah felt drawn to it, as if the theater were calling her back. Under the cover of night, they slipped through the fence and stood in the center of the charred ruins. The air was heavy, and the faint smell of smoke lingered, as if the fire had never truly been extinguished. Jason set up a small camera, documenting their exploration. "If there's any evidence left of Hargrave or the film, it'll be here," he said. As they sifted through the debris, Olivia found an old film reel canister half buried in ash. Its label was nearly illegible, but one word was clear: Hargrave. "Do we watch it?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. "We don't have a choice," Sarah said, surprising herself. She felt an inexplicable pull, as though the reel demanded to be seen. Unleashing the horror. Back at Jason's apartment, they set up an old projector. The reel was in surprisingly good condition, and soon the room was filled with the soft whirring of the machine. The footage was raw, unedited, and deeply disturbing. It showed Hargrave directing scenes of terror, actors screaming as fire consumed a set eerily similar to The Majestic. But as the reel continued, the footage shifted. The actors weren't acting anymore. Their screams turned guttural, their fear palpable. Hargrave stood off camera, his face illuminated by the flames, grinning as chaos unfolded. Then the screen went black, and new footage appeared. It was the trio, Jason, Olivia, and Sarah, sitting in the apartment, watching the reel. "What the hell?" Jason whispered. The camera on the screen zoomed closer, focusing on Jason. His image distorted, and suddenly, his body contorted violently. He screamed as shadowy hands emerged from the screen, pulling him into the projector. The machine exploded, sending shards of metal and glass flying. When Sarah and Olivia opened their eyes, Jason was gone. The reel lay in pieces, but the whispers continued, louder now, as if emanating from the walls. A final warning. Sarah and Olivia fled the apartment, but the horrors followed them. Shadows crept along the edges of their vision, and the smell of smoke became an ever-present reminder of what they had unleashed. Desperate, Sarah returned to the ruins of the Majestic. She stood where the screen once was, holding the fragments of the reel. "Hargrave!" she screamed into the night. "What do you want?" The air grew cold, and the charred figure appeared before her, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. "Finish the film!" it rasped. Before Sarah could react, the ground beneath her collapsed, and she fell into darkness. The endless screening. To this day, locals claim they can hear faint screams coming from the ruins of the Majestic. Some say they've seen a flickering light, as though a projector is still running deep underground. And those brave or foolish enough to investigate often find themselves drawn into a midnight screening of The Last Reel, their names added to the credits of an ever-growing cast. Months passed after Sarah's disappearance, and Olivia was the only survivor left who knew the truth. Her life had turned into a waking nightmare. Every night she'd hear faint whispers, see shadowy figures lurking just out of sight, and wake to find soot marks on her walls and floor. She knew it wouldn't stop until she finished what Sarah had started. Driven by desperation and guilt, Olivia began to piece together a plan. She needed to uncover what Edwin Hargrave had intended for The Last Reel. If finishing the film could end the curse, she would do it, but on her terms. Through old records and abandoned archives, Olivia unearthed more about Hargrave. She learned that the original last reel wasn't just a horror film, it was a ritual. Hargrave, obsessed with immortality, had discovered an ancient rite that could bind his soul to celluloid, granting him eternal life through his work. The fire that consumed the Majestic interrupted the ritual, trapping Hargrave between worlds, neither dead nor alive, but a malevolent force tied to the remnants of his masterpiece. Olivia knew the only way to break the curse was to destroy the last reel completely. But the fragments she and Sarah had recovered were gone, pulled into the void with Jason. Her only option was to return to the Majestic's ruins one last time, descending into darkness. On a cold, moonless night, Olivia returned to the theater's remains armed with a camera, a crowbar, and a gasoline can. Her plan was simple: find the source of the haunting, burn it to ashes, and end the nightmare. As she stepped onto the charred lot, the air grew heavy, and the faint hum of a projector filled her ears. The ground beneath her feet felt unnaturally warm, and the shadows seemed to ripple like water. Finding the spot where Sarah had vanished, Olivia used the crowbar to pry open the weakened floorboards. Beneath was a hidden staircase, spiraling downward into the earth. The faint flicker of light emanated from below, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of an old projector whirring to life. She descended, her heart pounding. At the bottom, she found herself in an underground chamber, the walls covered in burnt film reels and scorched movie posters. At the center of the room stood an old projector, its lens glowing with an unnatural light. On the screen, scenes from the last reel played in an endless loop, showing the faces of the victims, Jason, Sarah, and the others who had vanished during the cursed screenings. And there, standing before the screen, was the charred figure of Edwin Hargrave, confronting Hargrave. "You're late," Hargrave rasped, his voice crackling like firewood. His glowing eyes bore into Olivia as he gestured toward the projector. "The film is incomplete. Finish it, and you'll set them free." "I don't believe you," Olivia said, her voice trembling but firm. She tightened her grip on the gasoline can. "You're just trying to trap me too." Hargrave chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down her spine. "You misunderstand. I don't need to trap you. You came willingly. But if you destroy this," he gestured to the projector, "they'll be lost forever, trapped in the reel for eternity." Behind him, the faces on the screen turned toward Olivia, their eyes wide with terror. Sarah's face appeared among them, her lips forming the word, "help." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she struggled to decide. If Hargrave was lying, destroying the projector would free them all. But if he was telling the truth, she would doom them forever. The final cut. Hargrave moved closer, his charred hands reaching toward her. "Choose," he hissed. "Finish the film, or burn it all." Olivia closed her eyes, letting the fear and doubt wash over her. Then she remembered something Jason had said. Hargrave's power came from his desire for immortality. If she could deny him that, if she could destroy the ritual, his grip on the victims might break. Without hesitation, Olivia opened the gasoline can and poured its contents over the projector and film reels. Hargrave screamed, his voice echoing with fury and desperation. "No!" he bellowed. "You'll destroy them all!" Olivia hesitated for the briefest moment, her gaze flickering to the screen. Sarah mouthed the word, "trust," before her image dissolved into static. With a cry, Olivia struck a match and dropped it onto the projector. Flames erupted, consuming the reels and spreading across the room. Hargrave's form twisted and writhed, his screams blending with the roar of the fire. Escape and resolution. Olivia ran, the fire spreading rapidly behind her. She barely made it out before the ground collapsed, swallowing the chamber and its secrets. As she stumbled onto the street, she turned back to see the ruins of the Majestic smoldering one final time. The oppressive weight that had clung to her since that night lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. In the weeks that followed, the whispers ceased. The shadows disappeared. Olivia knew she had succeeded. Though the victims of the last reel were gone, their images never to be seen again, she believed they were finally free. But late at night, Olivia sometimes felt a faint hum in her ears, like the distant whir of a projector. And though she tried to convince herself it was her imagination, she always kept her curtains drawn, just in case those glowing eyes ever returned. Epilogue. Years later, an urban explorer digging through the rubble of the Majestic uncovered a single unmarked film reel. Intrigued, they brought it to a local film enthusiast, who eagerly set up a screening. The footage began innocently enough, showing scenes of an empty theater. But as the camera panned to the audience seats, the faces of those who had vanished, including Sarah, Jason, and Olivia, stared back. The explorers' screams echoed through the room as the projector whirred, the last remnants of the last reel beginning again. Thanks for watching Horrific Stories. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more spine-tingling stories. Until next time, keep your lights on and your fears closed.